Welcome, Coleman Report Live, St. Valentine's Day edition. Special guest Chris Hearn, Fountainhead Commercial Capital. Lance, I hear your voice in the background. Are you with us, Lance?
Yes, I'm with you, Bob. Sorry, guys. I've got internet issues today in my office, and I'm not able to be on video.
Arkansas is off the grid. Is that what you're telling me, Lance?
That is correct, sir.
Chris, big news yesterday. What is it?
We're one of the new SBLCs, so we're doing 7A loans here.
There's someone out there who doesn't know what the process is. This is one of 14 licenses SBA created back in the 70s?
Yeah, mid-70s, early 80s, and then they stopped. There's not going to be any new of these non-bank lender licenses.
Whose license did you acquire?
American Business Lending out of Texas.
Out of Texas, very good. But Chris, you're Mr. 504. How do you reconcile now you're crossing to the dark side and doing 7A? Tell us about that transition and what your business plan is.
You must have read a bunch of my LinkedIn comments yesterday, Bob. So no, a few people threw that out. Hey, look, I'm trying to meet the demands of our small business clients, and we have not been able to meet some of the working capital, business acquisition, partner buyout demands that folks have had since we started Fountainhead, and now we're going to do that. It's kind of silly that we're as well known and as much of an origination source as we are of small business deals all over the country. We might as well have another tool in our toolkit, and that's what we've got here. And I actually have experience myself doing this, and I've got a very experienced team that's just started. I can announce the names, but I'll do it probably in the next week or two. But yeah, we already hit the ground running, and as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to approve our very first 7A deal to be submitted.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Small business lending companies are very instrumental to this program. They
Yes.
are non-depository. They have a unique model. Very quickly, with what you're comfortable of sharing, what is your model and how are you going to get capital to Main Street?
Well, our models really, it's synergistic with what we already do. I mean, we see a tremendous amount of deal flow, well over $2-3 billion a year. Not all of that is eligible, of course, but we'll be able to actually do a lot more of transactions than what we currently do. So in terms of our go-to-market strategy, like I said, we're pretty well known. We have quite a database of people that we've worked with. I like to think once somebody's worked with us once, they come back and work with us forever. And this is just another opportunity, a business line that we'll be able to extend out and help a lot of America's businesses.
Well, very good. Hey, I'd love to have you stick around before you approve your first loan and comment on the rest of our information. I want to bring this up. I normally don't talk about macro issues, but this was in the Wall Street Journal. It's been all over the business news today. Everyone's reporting this dramatic decrease in retail sales. It's affected, the stock market's recovered. It affected the stock market a little bit. And I deal a lot with these polls, and I'm a big stats guy, and I think you need to take this all into perspective. First of all, whenever you see huge spikes and whatever the index is, I think you need to take that with a little bit of grain of salt. I mean, here we're talking about 4% decrease, but it's still, if you look at that top number, we're much better where we were in 18, 17, certainly during the Great Recession. Chris, you're on the ground. Did you clients experience this? Do we really have a 4% drop in retail sales year over year?
No, I mean, I haven't seen it. I mean, when we talked before we jumped on this webinar, I said, I'm not so sure the data is accurate given that some of the statisticians of the government just got back to work, a week and a half ago. So, yeah, I'm not sure I think this is a much ado about nothing. I'm certainly not seeing it. I've never been this busy in my entire career, Bob. There's more people trying to grow their business. And interestingly enough, I know this is a little bit off topic, but I got to tell you, the last month or two, I've never seen worse service in places I go, because I think it's attributable to businesses are struggling to find good quality workers. I think we've gone past optimal unemployment rate, and I think we're suffering a little bit out there. And but I don't think this is representative of.
Well, I think as small business lending professionals, we need to take all this information into account. I think when we see these type of things, we need to take pause and go, well, but do not accept it as face value. I don't believe these numbers. I'm with you. I try to talk to as many small business people every day. I know everyone on this call, they're professionals.
Right.
But even if you accept these numbers, look at where we were over 2 years ago. We're still off the charts.
Right.
Okay, very good. Hey, I want to talk about the top 20 lenders. We're not ready to release this, but this is a sneak peek. Congratulations to Live Oak Bank. What's interesting is there's been a huge shakeup in the rankings. Live Oak went from 10 to 1. Byline Bank, well, there were a couple of acquisitions there. New Tech, another small business lending company. Harvest, a small business lending company. But you're seeing some new players into the SBA lending realm. Harvest 43 to 16. They're a small business lending company. I did one of their did a podcast at another office. We've done some stuff with them. Ready Cap Lending. So I think we need to know who our competition is and what they do. But obviously Wells Fargo is still there. Huntington is there. JP Morgan. But these are amazing numbers. You have two lenders over $1 billion, and to make the top 20, you got to do $200 million.
It's amazing. I don't know if I've ever seen numbers like this before.
Yeah.
Wow, I have.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll be publishing this next week, but I thought I'd give you a sneak of this. Hey, let's go to the poll questions. Number 1, what's happening? Are you getting your backlog cleared out, or are we having issues? Chris, you don't have an opinion on this.
No, I do, actually, because the backlog affected 504s as well, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
The first 36 hours the government came back online, we got 4 of our approval authorizations that had been in right before the shutdown. I mean, it was really impressive. Of course, this all begs the question, especially looking at these polling resorts. What's going on in normal times then, gang? Right?
Yeah. Lance, what's your experience at your institution?
Well, I think that, I've seen a publication that indicates SBA's caught up from the shutdown.
The poll numbers seem to indicate that, yeah.
And it appears that's the case from some of the interaction I have with Citrus Heights. Most of what we're processing are delegated loans. So just having the SBA up and running, just being able to get in and process a loan in E-Tran or SBA 1 and get an SBA loan number has been what's important to us. We've just got a few deals at the GP processing center, but it seems that they are caught up because they're real responsive to what we're submitting.
Hey, this next, great, thanks, Lance. Lance, I need you to give a little context for our next question that we're saying, did the January 2018 changes in the SOP simplify equity injection? This was based on your webinar yesterday. This is probably a poor question from us because no one remembers what happened. But Lance, give a quick overview. What were the changes, and what were the significant changes for the industry that happened a year ago that we all need to be aware of?
Well, I think that SBA clarified what the minimum required equity injection was on startup deals. It's important to note, I shared a story yesterday, had an existing business that was looking at opening a new business, and that new business would be considered a startup, so they would have to meet that 10% requirement as well. But startups, they clarified 10% the minimum required. We did spend a lot of time talking yesterday, Bob, based on different, there were 10 different factors that we looked at, which might determine the need for more than what SBA requires, based on the industry performance, the life cycle of the business. Also on business acquisition loans, they simplified it. They took out the requirement on loans that have $500,000 or more in Blue Sky for a 25% injection. All BizAc loans are basically a 10% minimum required equity injection. And when you have a change of ownership, you've got to look at the new blended balance sheet and make a determination. They have to have at least 10% equity position in that as well.
Right.
The rest of your equity position requirements are still based on prudent lending standards. meaning you're going to set the equity amount based on what you would do on a similar size non-SBA loan. But, and I think all our participants yesterday agreed that the 5010-5J did a good job of simplifying understanding equity injection.
Yeah, I think for the 67% who said no, I think they forget we embraced it at the time. So I'm not criticizing anybody who said no. I think we just say we're operating under the new rules, and perhaps they're still confusing. How's that for a spin, Lance?
I think that's a pretty accurate spin, Bob.
The third poll question is, this is for your institution in your credit box. What percentage of Biz Act loans that you do 7A do you require that there is a standby by the seller? You don't require it. 25% of our loans, we want to have some sort of standby by the seller, or we require it a lot. Chris, what you have a brand new credit box. What's your opinion about this?
My guess is, it's really hard to say because I haven't had this much demand just yet. So yeah. I sense it's probably going to be less than 25% of them, because I suspect that most of our borrowers are going to be are going to have the cash injection themselves and not need the seller to hold back something. But we'll see.
Lance, what do you think about the 22% that said zero? Do you think that is part of a prudent lending practice to require a little bit of skin in the game from the seller?
Well, there are two reasons why you want some seller financing. One, by the nature of SBA lending is quite often you'll have a deal that's not fully collateralized according to commercial lending standards. So by requiring some seller financing, you certainly can improve the collateral position of the loan. The other reason that I like it, I put my liquidation hat on. If you've got a significant piece of seller financing, if there is something that goes wrong with the business after you do the SBA loan, you probably are going to have a go-to buyer down the road if you did get into liquidation. So I really like having seller financing on standby as part of a business acquisition loan. And I was really quite surprised, Bob, yesterday at the poll results when very few people had experienced a Biz Act loan with seller financing on standby as a part of it.
Yeah, and a quarter of our viewers say the same thing. Lance, very quickly, one of the things I appreciated what you talked about is one size does not fit all. The SOP minimum is 5% cash, 5% standby, but you were saying you may want to do that for a professional, for an orthodontist, but you don't want to do that for a restaurant.
Yeah, I think that we talked a lot about SBA's SOP. All the SOPs set minimum and maximum standards. And on equity injection, what SBA has in the SOP is the minimum requirements, pending the type of industry that the small business borrower is in. 10% may not be enough. A restaurant deal may require 20, 25, even 30% based on the type of restaurant, the life cycle it's in. So, that's something we emphasized in the webinar yesterday. Just because SBA says it's 10%, you need to look at a lot of other factors in being a prudent lender and determining the amount of equity you're going to require in the project.
Yesterday, SBA Administrator Lenny McMahon testified before the Senate. These are some of the stats. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to cut out portions of that. We're going to put that in our weekly update, our podcast. If you want to watch the whole thing, some of it's interesting. But 4,700 loans, over $2 billion. SBA, the professionals at SBA are doing the industry a great service.
They are. That's very impressive statistics.
Yeah. I'd like this. I think this is great for her to do that. She's now been to all 68 district offices, and they're claiming they're supporting $1.2 million jobs. And the Inspector General, SBA, is working on resolving their management issues. So very positive. Again, the small business committees, I'm not going on a limb, but it's one of the few, if the only, bipartisan committee in Washington, D.C. today. So you have support from both the Republicans and the Democrats.
Well, and Bob, it helps that I was in New York earlier this week in Dow Jones at the Wall Street Journal, and I was talking to the small business editor there, and she made the interesting observation. She said, Linda McMahon doesn't seem to be rocking the boat. She seems to be one of the administration officials that everybody seems to think is doing a pretty good job, and I think that these statistics bear it out. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
What I appreciate for the administrator is Chris, Lance, and I, we've been in this for a long time. And we go to the conferences and the administrator comes out and all it is a rehash of administration talking points, whether it's Obama, Bush, Clinton. That's been a consistent thing. Linda hasn't done that. She does a little bit of that, but she really focuses on, hey, my job is to make sure we get capital to Main Street. And I applaud her for that.
And she's using the programs that currently exist. She's not trying to come up with some new agenda and trying to push that. She is using what we already have and the great agency that exists and really trying to get it optimized. And I think that's what everybody is witnessing. And I think she needs to be applauded for this.
Hey, Joseph, make a note. Let's do a poll. We did this, I think, 6-9 months ago, what her approval rating was, and it was off the chart. Let's make sure we do that next week. Hey, we got some questions for you. Let's get into them. Ronnie asked a question. Lance, we have a customer that's closed their business and we've liquidated part of the collateral, but the borrower would like to continue paying the loan as they're saying, okay, we're responsible for it. They've got a new job. What do we do? Do we liquidate it? Do we wrap it up? Do we file a judgment? What do we do, Lance?
Well, that's a situation that occurs periodically in SBA servicing. And if you've got a borrower that wants to continue to repay the loan, certainly that's something you'll want to notify SBA about. But I think SBA is going to be agreeable to setting up a workout plan where they repay the loan instead of just, moving into enforced collection and charging off the loan. So, I think if you have a cooperative borrower who has good employment, who's willing to repay the loan, I think you'll want to document your file and make sure you put information in that shows why you chose to let them continue doing that. But I think it's the best practice to go ahead and let them repay.
Yeah, and we don't need to get a judgment. It's just like any other workout. They're going to pay it. Right. Great.
As long as the loan's current, Bob, it's good.
Yeah. Next question is, how do we document a gift from a home equity line? Lance, you talked about this yesterday. The scenario is we're getting the home equity HELOC loan. The spouse is going to cover those payments through their employment, but that money is going to go into the new business. But it's going to fund today, and then you're going to fund the 7A loan next week. How do you document that, Lance? Because we don't have the 2-month statement rule.
Well, if you're going to get if home equity line of credit is going to be used for the equity injection, there are a couple things that you have to do to properly document. One is to make sure and get a copy of the note on the home equity line of credit. Make sure and provide a statement prior to closing showing the availability of an amount of money equal to or greater than the equity injection requirement. And then you need to have adequate documentation to show that there is a secondary source of repayment, which you indicated there was a spouse's income. If you go ahead and do that, you'll be fine using that as equity injection source. Again, you want to have a copy of the home equity line of credit note. You want to have a copy of a statement showing the availability prior to close. You want to document the actual equity injection, and then you want to have a documentation that shows that there's an adequate secondary source of repayment.
Chris, I'm going to throw this one to you. What would you prefer? Would you prefer for the source of the equity injection comes from a home equity line of credit or from a 401k retirement? Next slide, guys. Let's move on.
I would prefer a 401k, a self-directed 401k. Yeah.
Hey, Chris Craven, Great response, Chris. That's what I said yesterday. Also,
I don't think there's any question.
I think that,
Very different
yeah,
equity source.
Chris. Chris, my thought was, you're getting the equity injection without incurring additional debt.
That's right.
It's going to be better for your debt coverage overall,
Yep.
better for the longevity and success of the small business.
That's right. That's right.
Guys, the question is, well, how do we document this? How do we document that's coming from the 401k?
Well, I mean, for starters, there's a variety of companies out there that you can do self-directed 401ks, and there's also a form that SBA requires that you have to document this. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lance. You were saying something?
Yeah, Chris hit it on the money. You're going to document the source with a couple of statements from the 401k. There are a couple of forms that are required. And like Chris said, there are companies out there that will help a small business owner use 401k money as equity injection into the small business.
Wrapping up the equity injection conversation.
And SEPs too, SEP IRAs too, self-directed SEPs too. Yeah.
Just remember, everyone, you need the number one source of guaranteed denials repairs is lack of documenting equity injection. Lance did a great job yesterday, and he made the point. Make sure, just because you get that cashier's check for $100,000, you got to go back to the original source and get the statements to verify everything. Correct, Lance?
Well, I think one of the things that I wanted to get across yesterday was you can't just accept a document on face value. You as a prudent lender have to vet that document to make sure it's real, because the Inspector General, there's several instances of loans that they came across during our peer review, which is an improper payment review, where they found equity injection documentation. For instance, one example, Bob, that I gave on a case that I read about, the equity injection was coming from a bank account. The documentation were statements from that bank account, and they were done, the statements, when you looked at them and pulled the bank name, that bank didn't exist.
If you want to have a fright, go to Craigslist, type in bank financial statement, and there's you can get 12 people who will make up whatever document that you want. So old trust but verify. Hey, we're running out of time. I want to go to this slide. Please take access to these. Let's go to the next slide, guys. Take next one. Keep going. There we go. There are a number of great professional industry events coming up in the course of this year. Please, if one's in your area, please attend it. These are very minimal cost. I know there's some early bird cutoffs coming up, but we're talking a couple $100. These are great professional training opportunities sponsored by a number of different people. Chris, one's in your backyard, Lance. I know you're speaking at a couple of them. Which ones are you attending, Lance?
Well, I'll be speaking at Mid-America Lenders Conference 2019. It's one of the oldest and largest lenders conferences in the country, and I've been doing it, Bob, for 12 years. So I'm looking forward to being there again. Good.
And Chris, Orlando's in your backyard.
Yep, we'll have people at a lot of these. Absolutely, it's great educational, as you said.
Please, great networking, great buy-in from SBA. Washington goes a lot. I'm actually going to be in the Puerto Rico Rural Investment Summit in a couple of weeks, and that's for USDA DNI. I think we have other conferences up there or something. But please, if you're close by, it's well worth your time to do that. Go back to the secondary market slide, please, Joseph. What's going on in the secondary market, Chris? Up, down, flat?
I think it's pretty flat in my interpretation, particularly on the 7A side. You do only have one institution represented here on the 504 secondary market, but there's others out there as well. But yeah, I think 7A seems to be pretty flat right now.
Very good.
Yeah.
Lance, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate everyone dialing in. That's one of our highest numbers of attendance. We have the webinar next week with Lance and I on assisted living. Please take advantage of that. And with that, thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Hey, have a great weekend. Thank you.